All right, so welcome back, class. Today we're going to go through adding our data into ArcGIS. So to start, we're actually going to open up ArcCatalogue. And then we're going to tell ArcCatalogue where our data are stored. So we will see folder connections up in this almost top left-hand corner. We will right-click, hit connect to folder, and we're going to look for that Google Drive that we had Kumo link to earlier. So we're going to search for that drive. For me, it's the iDrive. For you, it may be something different. And we're going to navigate to that folder where our data are held. So we're going to go to our ENST 456 folder that we created, and then we'll hit OK. And we'll know that we navigated to the correct folder because we'll see our data. Now we're going to minimize ArcCatalogue, and then we're going to open up ArcMap. And that'll take a moment to load. And then when we're in ArcMap, we're going to tell it to look for the folder that we're using in ArcCatalogue. So first, let's hit cancel when we're prompted to create a blank map. We always hit cancel. So now we're actually going to go to this plus button, that little down arrow. So it's always fun to add a base map first, just to help us orient ourselves as to where we are. So we can go ahead and add like a streets base map or whatever you prefer. And then once that appears, then we will add in our data. And that takes a moment for the base map to load. I apologize for my dog making some noises. Okay, so there's our base map. So now we're going to add in our own data. So again, we do that down arrow that's associated with that big plus button. Now we're going to go to Add Data. And we will navigate up towards Folder Connections. So we double click on Folder Connections and our folder, and then that CSV file. Click Add. Now, it may appear like, oh my gosh, it's not there. We just haven't told GIS yet, which is latitude, which is longitude. So now we have to do that. So we're going to right click. So we'll see over in our table of contents, we'll find our CSV file. We're going to right click on that and go to Display XY Data and click on that. Now this is our opportunity to tell ArcGIS, which is latitude and longitude. So it's going to attempt to look at your columns of data and figure it out. Don't expect it to be correct. You need to go in and tell it. Now, if you don't remember which is the latitude and longitude, I like to look at this graphic. So remember for the coordinate system, latitude, longitude. So latitude is the degrees above or below the equator. So the equator is set at 0, and we have 90 degrees above or below. And you can look at it kind of like 90 degrees if you're looking at a sphere, if the globe were a sphere. But our planet is not. We know it's an ellipsoid. So that's latitude. Whereas longitude is the degrees east or west of the prime meridian. So the prime meridian is set at 0. And now we can measure 180 degrees west or east of the prime meridian. So in this example of New Orleans, it is 30 degrees north or positive of the equator and 90 degrees west. So you can see our x-axis is actually longitude. So we're going to tell our x field to be longitude, that column. We're going to tell our y field to be the latitude column. Then you'll see this description, and it's going to try to make a guess as to which coordinate system this is based on and which datum. We're going to go over datum in our next video. But so we're going to tell ArcGIS which datum was used. And that was the first thing we had to think about when we downloaded our data from eBird. So when I originally went and got all the ruby-throated hummingbird locations over the last 5 years, the first question I had to ask was, what was the datum and has this already been projected or not? And so, no, it has not been projected yet. We'll be doing that ourselves in another lesson. And it was based on WGS 84. So we're going to change this. So we're going to go into geographic coordinate system, not projected. So we're going to open up geographic coordinate system. We're going to go to world, because it was W, it was world geographic system. So we're going to open up world. We're going to go find WGS 1984. There we go. And now we'll hit OK. Now it's set correctly. We're going to keep this warn me checked right here. And now we're going to hit OK. And you'll notice this message comes up saying the data does not have an object ID field. What that means is every row of data does not have a unique identification number, also known as a federal identification number, or a federal identification, FID. So we're going to, one of the early things we're going to do is export our table into a shapefile. And then ArcGIS will add in an FID so that every row of data, and you know we have over 4,000 sightings, so over 4,000 rows, every row will then have a unique ID number so that as we make changes to it, as we modify, analyze, add more data to our existing data, it'll always have, the new values will always have an ID number associated with it. So we're going to hit OK. So we understand we need to export our CSV file into a shapefile. So here are our locations, and let's get a closer look. Let's right-click and go to Zoom to Layer. Great, and that is exactly what I was expecting. But like I said, we need to export this to a shapefile instead of continuing to use it as a CSV file. So we will right-click on it. We will go to Data, sorry about that. We're going to go to Data and Export Data. And I will fix that in a moment. Data, export data. And we do want to keep it to all features. And we want to keep it as this layer's source data. Output feature class. That means where do you want it to be saved? And what are we going to name it? So we're going to browse to our folder connections. So it already found that folder for me. Remember, it's the I folder. And I'm going to call it, we need to keep them short, like usually under 13 characters, and no spaces, no special symbols or characters. So something that's meaningful to me. So I'm going to call it full_export. And it's a shapefile. We make sure we keep that as a shapefile. And hit save. And OK. And if your name is too long, or if it has special characters that ArcGIS doesn't understand, you'll have an error message. And you'll start to figure out what a lot of these error messages mean. And first thing to do is shorten the name, take out any special symbols or spaces. That's always a fast way to troubleshoot. Yes, let's add our exported data as another layer on our map. So we'll see it show up in our table of contents. So now we actually no longer need the CSV file. If we wanted to get rid of it, we could certainly go right-click and remove, since we don't need it, because from now on, we're just working on this shapefile. Okay, so let's explore a little bit, shall we? Let's look at the attribute table. So it sees, 4,377 sightings. So that's all correct. So now we're seeing that FID, so that federal ID. So this unique number. We see the latitude, longitude, the day, month, year, everything we were expecting. So great. So let's close out of that. Now let's play around with the properties. So this is our chance. So we have Symbology. We have, let's see, general. If we want to change the name of it, we don't like full export. Maybe that's meaningless to us. We could call it ruby-throated hummingbirds. All right. So here, the source is where we can check that we have not projected our data yet. It is still a coordinate system. We can check our file shape, things like that. Something to do that's fun is always playing around with the symbology. We can change the colors, change the shapes. You can have a lot of fun with this. You can make the sizes really big or really small. So symbology is always fun to play with. All right, and some of these other features we'll go through in a different lesson. Okay, so we've played around. Let's say, for this example, we are only interested in the hummingbirds that were seen in Maryland. So we're not interested in all these other states. To select out just the Maryland sightings, or if you want to just a certain month or year, you're going to go back into your attribute table and do a query, or tell ArcGIS you want it to subset the data. So you will right-click on your shapefile. You'll go to Open Attribute Table. Then from this down arrow button next to Table Options, this is where we're going to open this up, and we're going to tell it to select by certain attributes. Okay, so select by attributes. And for this example, I said just the hummingbirds that were seen in the state of Maryland. So we're going to make sure our method is create a new selection. Click on state. We're actually going to double click on state, or whatever attribute it is that we're trying to select by. We'll say equals the state of Maryland. In some cases, you might want to select for months that are greater than March or less than December or what have you. So you can tell it whatever you want, really, based on your data. So then we go to Get Unique Values. And this is where we will find Maryland. We will double click on Maryland. And then we go to Verify. Let's make sure our query is set correctly. And yes, expression was successfully verified. We'll hit OK. Now we will hit Apply. And it is going to pull out just those that are in Maryland. So let's close out of our attribute table. And indeed, we see just Maryland. Just to make sure, let's get closer in. Let's right-click and zoom to layer. I guess it already is zoomed to layer because we still have all the data there. We're just highlighting in a different color the ones that met our criteria. So let's say we want to just save our Maryland locations. So now we're going to right-click and export the data. So remember, it's not as easy as file save as in other programs. Here we're exporting just the Maryland data. So we want to export. So we're using selected features, so just those Maryland data. We're going to go to this layer's source data. And we're going to title it something like Maryland or MD Hummers or what have you. And make sure you're at Shapefile and hit Save and hit OK. And this does take a while because it is going through all of the data and just saving those few that were selected. And it's saving it as another shapefile. And yes, we want to add this new layer to our map. So we will see it appear in our table of contents. So let's minimize our full data, just keep our Maryland data. Now we can zoom to layer because now we have data that are just composed of the Maryland sightings. And again, we can play around with the properties. We can play with the colors and shapes, things like that. Okay. So when we have what we want, let's say we wanted to make a nice, pretty map. We can always change over to layout view. You know, from last week's lesson, we learned how to add in our title, our north arrow, our scale bar, things like that. And we can always save that as a nice JPEG or PDF. So here's our final data that we want. So let's say we were just interested in the Maryland hummingbirds. So that is all the steps you would take to get to that layer, or to create a layer just of the Maryland hummingbird data. And in future weeks, we'll do more things to this layer. I just wanted you to learn how to get your data into ArcGIS and how to manipulate it to use the attribute table to be able to select just the data that you're interested in. So that's it for this week's lesson. Make sure you go into ArcCatalogue and refresh our folder. So we click on our folder and then we right click and go to refresh. And indeed, we have all of our shapefiles that we created. So yay, it's saved correctly. Then we can disconnect our folder. So we right click and disconnect. Now we can start closing out everything. Nope. And closing. We will double click on log off. And that's it for the week. Hope you have a great week and good luck on this week's quiz and discussion.